session today where we're going to talk to you about your NHS pension in the Scottish NHS. So that is SPPA, or Scottish Public Pensions Association. And in particular, we're going to talk about something called your Remedial Service Statement. Okay. So, little bit of an overview for you. What we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a chat around roles and responsibilities, just so that we're all up to speed with that. We're going to do a recap on the NHS pension scheme and McCloud, because these statements that you've got are telling you things about your pension. So it's important that you understand how the pension works, so you can then understand the statement. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're then going to talk again about McCloud. Because McCloud is the reason why we've got this statement. So again, we need to make sure that we understand what it is, so that we can understand the statement. We're then going to go through the statement. So we're going to talk to you about what the statement is and some of the key things that the statement is telling you and what you need to know. There are some known issues with the statements, and some of you may or may not be aware of this already. So I'm then going to tell you about what those issues are, just so that you've got them flagged. And then I've got a little action list for you at the end for you to have a look at. Very happy to take questions during this session, because it's important you get what you need. Couple of things about the questions though. The first one is, I don't want any personal data, okay? Because everybody's on this, and remember, it's a recording. So I don't need to know your name, your address, your date of birth, anything like that, because otherwise it's going to be out there for everybody to know. Generalist type circumstances are fine. If something is a bit too niche or a bit too specialist, then I'll probably defer the question and maybe come back to you at the end, or at another time I might send you an email. Okay, so if I skip on, there's a reason why. Also, you can ask questions by popping them in the chat box, or you can unmute yourselves and raise your hand, and I'll come to you at the relevant time. Now, you can see here the agenda, okay? So I want to ask you to help me to give you the best session possible. And the way that that's going to work is if you ask a question about the section that I am on. So, for example, if I'm talking about what the NHS pension scheme is, and you're asking me about an issue with your statement, I'm not going to cover it at that time, because it's not relevant to the particular section that we're on. It's not because I'm mean, it's because we've only got a certain amount of time, and to get the most out of this, we need the session to flow. So if you've got a question about issues, try and keep it for the issues section, if that makes sense, just so that we can keep it moving in as smooth a way as possible. Again, for anybody who can't see the slides, I'm really sorry about that. It does seem that the majority can. Sometimes with big sessions, when your internet connection is not great, it can mean that things like the slides and the sound don't work. So I'm emailing the slides to anybody who can't see them. My email address is in the box. So you can just ping me an email. I will try and be emailing the slides as I'm talking to you in some sort of multitasking type regime that I've got going on as well. Okay. Perfect. So remember what we said was that we are going to start and build. So we're going to do all these recaps, because then that builds us up to the statement, which means that you should then be able to make a bit more sense of the statement. So just out of interest, has anybody had their remedial service statement? Yes. So we've had a question in the chat. Is this applicable only for Scotland? Yes. So what we're talking about is SPPA. That's the title of the session, SPPA NHS Annual Benefit Statements. So they're only applicable to Scotland. England will be doing something similar. They have not yet, and they may look different, and I don't know exactly what they're going to contain. So this is very specific to the Scottish NHS. Okay, so have you had them? Quite a few of you have, some of you have not. Okay, so what I can tell you at this stage is that they are going to active members at the moment. So if you are a retired member, you are not getting your statement yet. The statements are all going out in different tranches, and we're going to talk about that when I get a bit more into McCloud. So at the moment, those of you that may have had a statement are probably an active member. Okay, not all active members have had them yet, because they're being phased out, because they can't send tens of thousands of statements out in one go. It doesn't work. There will be some of you that will have slightly more complicated circumstances, which means you will probably come a little bit later, because they're having to do something special for you. Okay, GPs, for example. Okay, so it doesn't mean if you're not a GP that you're not special. There still might be special circumstances, but we do know they're being emailed, and they're being emailed to personal email addresses if SPPA have one for you, and sometimes they're going into junk. So if you haven't checked at all, it might be worth going back and checking your junk folder over the last 6 weeks or so, just to see if it's actually gone in there and you didn't know. Okay, but don't panic if you haven't had it. That is the first thing, because what normally happens is I get 2 seconds into a session and then I get 20 people saying I haven't had one yet. It's okay if you haven't had it. It's being phased. Okay, brilliant. So let's start with roles and responsibilities. I always like to do this in every single session, so if you've heard this before, you get to hear it again. It's very lucky. When we talk on the Facebook group and in sessions like this, we talk about different aspects, different roles, people doing different things. I think it's really helpful to understand where those lines are, if you like, in terms of who does what. Now, the NHS pension scheme, they are separate across the nations. So we will refer to the NHS pension scheme as the NHS pension scheme in inverted commas, but actually they are different schemes across the nation. So NHS pensions Scotland is separate to NHS pensions Northern Ireland is separate to NHS pensions England and Wales. England and Wales are together. Okay, so England and Wales, for example, is a different scheme to Scotland. And that means that you are administered separately. I'll come on to what that means in a minute. And therefore, things are a little bit different for you. Very similar. Scheme rules are all the same, but there are some differences in processes and things like that. So they are separate schemes. So when we look at roles and responsibilities, the big one really is with your employer. Your employer has quite a lot of roles when it comes to the pension. And a lot of people don't appreciate that. So if anything goes wrong, they automatically assume it's the pension scheme, but it might not be. And actually, when we talk about your employer, we can split your employer into different categories again. So within the employer, we've got the HR team, we've got the payroll team. You might have a separate pensions team. Not everybody does, but some do. And it might also be your line manager. So all of these have got roles when it comes to your pension. HR should create your policies. So you should, for example, have retirement policies and flexible working policies, and they come from HR. Your payroll team will be the team that put you into the pension. They are the team who deduct your pension contributions. If you don't have a pensions team, then they will also be the people that deal with your pensions information that goes to NHS pensions. NHS pensions don't have any information about you other than what is given to them by their employer. So if any of that is wrong, then it's because that can mean that your pension is wrong. So that's really important part of the process. And then your line manager might also be involved if you are looking to change your working hours, partially retire, something like that. So all of these have got different roles. The biggest one, as I say, is making sure you're in the scheme and making sure that your pay and service information is provided correctly to NHS pensions. NHS pensions then is the pension scheme. And the pension scheme is the NHS pension scheme, but it is administered by SPPA, which is the Scottish Public Pensions Association. Okay, so they are the people who are responsible for producing these wonderful statements that we're going to talk about. They're responsible for putting your pension benefits into payment, for calculating your benefits. But if any of the information they get from your employer is missing or is incorrect, that means the figures that they provide to you will also be missing or incorrect. Agency, sorry, Steve, did I say association? That's agency. I'm just checking you're awake. Thank you. So you need to, they need to kind of be in cohesion with each other. So the first port of call, usually, if something is wrong, such as pay or service is missing, is you need to go to your employer first, because they are the people who should be providing it to the pension scheme. Now, the thing about that is that service can sometimes be missing, particularly if it's from a number of years ago. So before the days of where we had whizzy data feeds that go through electronically, everything was done manually. And of course, when things are done manually, there is more scope for error and for things to go missing. So we would always say that you must always check things like, does your service look right, and so on, because if it's wrong, then your pension is going to be wrong. And that is where you come in. This is your pension, okay? It's not mine. It's not your employer's. It's not the SPPA's, it's yours. So you need to really get into this stuff to make sure that it's right for you. Your pension is going to be your first or second biggest asset. If it's second, it's usually only behind your house. So it's really important that you take the time to appreciate what it is and understand it. You wouldn't make a significant purchase without doing some research. So what I mean by that is you're probably not going to buy a car without researching it. You're probably not going to book a holiday even without doing some research. You're probably not going to buy a house without doing some research or getting a survey to make sure it's good value for money, all those different things. We just go along and we do that because we assume that's what we should do, but we don't do it so much with the pension. And that probably comes down to how much do we value it or how much do we not value it. Let me give you an example. If my pension, my annual pension, because remember what this scheme is doing is giving us an income for life, like a salary for when we stop work. So if my annual pension is £10,000 a year, I'm going to receive that every year that I'm alive. If I live for 25 years, I'll have received £10,000 a year for 25 years. That's £250,000. But I've also took a lump sum, so that's £280,000. And actually, when my pension is in payment to me, it increases by inflation each year. So that might make it more like £320,000 worth of pension that I've had in my lifetime. That is more than my house. It's almost double what my house is worth, actually. So that is a good illustration of how valuable this benefit is. And this is why we need to take responsibility for it and we need to be looking at things. And we're going to look at that as we go through the session. And it's really important. But you are here today, which is excellent, because what that means is you want to know more and you're keen to find out. So just to kind of put that in a bit of perspective for you, it's super, super important. Hello, Debbie. Is this only service that counts from the time you started paying in the pension? So when we look at the statements, which we're going to look at shortly, it tells you the service. All the pension is interested in is the service that you were in the scheme for. Doesn't care if you actually started working in the NHS 5 years earlier, because it doesn't affect the pension. So what the pension is interested in is the length of time that you've been in the scheme for, and that's what it's looking at. Yeah. Couple of things as well that I would just like to chat to you. Seems irrelevant, but just because it's questions come up. Not all pensions are created equal. So we all hear the word pension and we all think they all work the same way. They do not. Typically in the UK, we've got two different sorts of pension scheme. So if we say a pension, it will split into one of these two categories. And that is defined benefit or defined contribution. Often abbreviated, as you can see there, from to DV and DC. So anybody's on the slides, we're now on slide 5. Okay. DB schemes are defined benefit schemes, and that is like your NHS pension. DC schemes are defined contribution schemes, and these are very different. But these schemes are talked about more. And the reason they're talked about more is because they affect more people. It's very difficult to find a defined benefit scheme outside of the public sector, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So everybody who works in the private sector mainly is going to be in a defined contribution scheme, and that's why they're talked about more. A defined contribution scheme, as you can see from my lovely image, is a scheme that effectively is an investment fund. So contributions are paid in and they are invested, and the value of that pot of money or fund can therefore go up or down according to investment performance. Now, I did a little post on Facebook about this yesterday because those of us who are in these types of schemes have seen a sudden drop off because of America, let's blame America, and certain things in the stock market that we can't control. So my pension pot dropped by about 20 grand over the last 2 weeks. Doesn't matter. I'm not putting it into payment yet. It's going to go back up again. But all that risk about what happens in the stock market sits with me as a member. And then this pot of money will either go up or down according to what I pay in, but also what is happening within those markets. Okay. And then when I retire, I've got a pot of money and I can choose what I do with that pot of money. Okay. You guys have a defined benefit scheme. And what that means is that your pension provides you with an annual income for when you stop work, like a salary. And it's calculated on a set of formulas. And that means that the scheme promises to pay you that income based on those formulas. Doesn't matter what's happening in America. Doesn't matter if we go into recession and the four horsemen of the apocalypse ride in. You will still get whatever the scheme promises to pay you under the scheme rules as an annual income. And there are a series of rules that calculate that, which we're going to look at in a moment. It's also backed by the Treasury. So if for whatever reason there was not enough money in the scheme to pay the pension benefits, the Treasury hoys in some more. It just throws it in to top it up. It is one of the best and the best value and the safest form of pension savings you can have. Okay, so if I've got one of these defined contribution schemes and I say I've got 100 grand in there, and you look at your NHS pension, you might think, oh, well, my NHS pension is only £10,000 a year, but Laura's got a pot of 100,000. Yeah, I have. Okay. But if I want to take £10,000 a year out of my £100,000, that's going to last me 10 years. Your £10,000 a year is paid to you for as long as you live. So if you live for 25 years, that's, as we said before, upwards of 300k by the time we factored everything else in. So do you see what I mean? So your pension is massively valuable, but it's not the same as one of these. They're both good. They both work well in different ways. They are both good ways to save for retirement. But generally speaking, we would say defined benefit scheme will outstrip a defined contribution scheme very easily, to the point where I would chew my right arm off to have a defined benefit scheme. So if we can understand that, we know not to compare the two, because that's what people do. And we also need to know that whatever happens in the stock market at the moment, or America are doing or not doing, and now China, has nothing to do with your pension. It won't have any impact on the way that your pension is calculated. Okay. Little throwaway there because of what's happening this week. Any questions on that?
No, it's perfectly clear.
Thank you. Okay. NHS pension scheme. We're on slide 6 for those of you with slides. Yes, that's right, Michael. The defined benefit when it's in payment goes up each year in line with the increase in the consumer price index. Uncapped. So it's had some quite big increases in the last few years. Okay, so the NHS pension scheme then, we've got 3 sections, okay? So you can see we've got 95, 2008 and 2015, which is also referred to as the care section. So we're going to see that when we look at your statements. It says care, and care stands for career average revalued earnings, or we'll call them career average. Okay. So 95 and 2008, you will see referred to as your final salary sections. And what that really means is that the pension benefits from either of these sections is calculated with a link to your final pay or salary. Okay, so even though you are now in the 2015 or career average section, these 2 sections will still link to your current pay. Okay, so that's really important. So any pay rises, that means that it will increase these parts of the pension. Okay. And they're calculated using formulas, and we've quite handily for you put a copy of the formulas in there, so it means you can check things, which is exciting, isn't it? Who doesn't love a bit of maths on a Tuesday night? Now, you can see we've got a fraction, and a fraction is what we call an accrual rate, and that just means the rate at which the pension builds up. So for 1995, we would do 1 divided by 80 times by service times by pay. Okay. So service is the length of time that we have been in this particular section for, only this section. Pro rata for any part-time working, and it doesn't include any unpaid leave. So going back to Debbie's question earlier, it also won't include any service from before you were in the scheme. It's just interested in the pension scheme. The pay then, as we said, is linked to current pay still, but it is full-time equivalent pay. So if you are part-time, it will use your full-time equivalent pay. If you now go part-time, it does not affect either of these 2 sections because it's always full-time equivalent. That is quite exciting and quite important. So the way that we calculate the pension is 1 divided by 80 times by service times by pay. And if that is £10,000, that means I'm going to get £10,000 a year from my pension age. In the 95 section, we also have a lump sum, and the lump sum is 3 times the pension. So if my pension is £10,000, then 3 times that, it's going to be £30,000. Okay. For 2008, it's very similar. We've got a different fraction. It's 1/60th this time. So is a 60th bigger or smaller than an 80th?
Smaller.
It's bigger. So fractions are weird. They're backwards. So the smaller the number on the bottom, the bigger the portion. So let me put it to you in a way that might make more sense. If you've got two cakes, you've got two birthday cakes, the same size, okay, and you cut one into 80 slices, that they would each slice would be an 80th. If you cut the other one into 60 slices, each one of those would be a 60th. So which one has got the bigger slice is the 60th because there's less of them. So the smaller the number on the bottom, the bigger the portion, okay? So a 60th is bigger than an 80th. So 2008 is 1 divided by 60 times by service times by, again, a link to final pay. And that gives us an annual income. So again, if that's £10,000, that is £10,000 a year. We don't get an automatic lump sum in 2008. But we do get the choice to swap some pension for lump sum when we retire, and that's called commutation. Now, which of these sections you're in depends on when you joined. So if you joined the pension scheme before the 1st of April 2008, you will be in the 1995 section. And if you joined between the 1st of April 2008 and the 31st of March 2015, you will have joined in the 2008 section. The reason I'm saying this is because on your statement, as we're going to see a bit later, it just refers to the final salary section. It doesn't tell you which one. So you'll need to know that based on when you joined, typically. Okay, a couple of questions. I'm coming back to special class, guys, so don't worry about that. Is 1995 for GPs also career average? Yes, Neil. So this section here that we're talking about, these two sections are what we call for officers. Officers are basically anyone who is not a practitioner, and a practitioner is a GP or a dentist. Okay, so if you are not a GP or a dentist, this is how your pension is calculated. If you are a GP or a dentist, then your 1995 or 08 benefits are effectively also career average, and it's got a slightly different formula. Okay. With another question, where are we? The final reckonable pay, Debbie, is that the same as your gross annual salary amount when you retire? So final reckonable pay for anybody who is in the 2008 section is actually the highest average consecutive 3 years in the last 10 adjusted for inflation. So what that means is we go back 10 years, we take year 10, year 9, year 8, revalue them by inflation, add them together, divide by 3. Then we take year 9, year 8, year 7, revalue them, add them together, divide them by 3. And we do that all the way through, and we use whichever one of those is the highest. So recently we've had some quite high periods of inflation, so it's quite possible that your the pay that they use is the past pay, because when we add on inflation, it is higher. Hi Amanda, can I recheck part-time in 95? If you had a period of part-time, is that not taken into account in final calculations? I had to answer the door. Was it Amazon, Amanda? So 1995 is service, well, and 2008 are both service and pay related. The service is the length of time in this section 4, so usually now up to March 22, pro rata for any part-time working in that time, but uses full-time equivalent pay. So if you now go part-time, it doesn't affect 1995 because it always uses full-time pay, and you're not adding any more service. It will just affect 2015. Okay, so in the past, yes, because the service is reduced, but now, no, because we always use full-time pay. Does that make sense? Tremendous. 2015 then, or care as we're going to see it. Again, it's still a defined benefit scheme because we've still got a formula that calculates our pension for us. And you can see we've got another fraction, which is 1 over 54. So is 1 over 54 bigger or smaller than 1 over 80?
Bigger.
Bigger.
Hurrah! It is. It's actually a third bigger, which is quite surprising, isn't it? So it grows much quicker. But what it does is it grows each year based on your pay each year. So think of it like building blocks. So in year one, I'm going to keep it simple because maths. My pay is 54,000. So I divide that by the 54 that we can see here. And that means I've got £1,000 per annum of pension at pension age. Brilliant. And then the next year we do the same thing again. So let's say my pay still hasn't changed. It's still 54,000. I'm going to divide it by 54. That's another £1,000. So I now add that on to the £1,000 that I've already got. And I've now got £2,000 per year of pension. And the next year we do the same thing again and the same thing again. So it's career average in that we're adding 1/54th of your pay each year that you're in the scheme for, this scheme. Okay, so it's an average across your length in this scheme. It uses actual pensionable pay. So if you're part-time, it'll be part-time pay. And it also increases each year by inflation plus 1.5%. Okay. Now, again, we don't get an automatic lump sum in this section, but we can at retirement choose to swap pension for a lump sum, and that's called commutation. Now, let's talk about NPA, as you can see here. So NPA stands for normal pension age. And normal pension age is usually the age at which you can access the pension benefits without them being reduced for early payment. So in 1995, it's typically 60, unless, as somebody's already asked about this, you've got special class status. If you have a special class status, it will be 55. Now, this is one of the issues we're going to come on to later, so don't beat me to it. But I can talk to you about special class later. So if you've got special class, usually if you've got it, you know, it means you can access 1995 from 55 potentially without a reduction, but for everybody else, it is 60. For 2008, it's 65. And for 2015, it is whatever your state pension age is. So that could be 66, it could be 67, mine is 68. Excellent. So it's just whatever your state pension age happens to be. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't access my career average pension until I'm 68. No. That is the normal pension age for the section. It's not the mandatory age. It's not the age that I have to take the pension. It's not the earliest age I can take the pension. It's the normal age for this section. So if I say to the scheme, hello, I would like to take my 2015 pension at 60, please. The scheme will go, okay. But we thought we were going to pay it to you from 68. And I'll go, yeah, but I want it now. Thank you. So the scheme will say, okay, that's fine. But instead of paying you £10,000 a year, we're going to pay you £7,000 a year. And the reason for that is because we're going to have to pay it to you now for 8 years longer than we were expecting. Okay, so that's called an early retirement reduction. And all it's doing is reapportioning my pension across more years. So sometimes I see people say they're being penalised or they're losing out, and none of those things are true. You're being penalised for nothing. What you're wanting to do is have access to your money earlier, so it's got to be spread over more years, and that's all the early retirement factor is doing. So assuming you have an average life expectancy, you will end up overall with the same amount of money. Okay, so what you need to do is work out what you want to do and can you afford to do it. We're going to look at an example of that later. So they all have separate ages. You can take them together or you can take them separately. If you take 2015 early, it will be reduced, but remember it's built up more to start with. And again, there's more on that later. So a lot of you now, well, all of you, because you're on this session, will have two sections. So you might have 95 and 2015, for example, or 2008 and 2015, just to give you an idea. But they are under the umbrella of the NHS pension scheme, but they're actually independent to each other, so you can make independent decisions about them. Okay. Tracy, is 95 based on the last full-time salary? So if you finish on the 1st of June, your salary on the 31st of May? No, 1995 is based on, the definition is the highest last 12 months in the last 3 years. So what it actually does is if you were retiring on the 1st of June 2025, it will look back at what your actual pensionable pay was from the last 12 months. So from the 1st of June 24 to the 31st of May 25. And we'll look at what your pensionable pay was for that period and use that. It will then go 12 months before that. So 1st of June 23 to June 24. And then 1st of June 22 to June 23. And it will use whichever of those 12 months is the highest. For most people, it's usually the last 12 months, but not always. So if your pay goes up on the 31st of May 25, it will make no difference really to your pension if you're retiring on the 1st of June, because it's looking back at the last 12 months usually. Oh, and that might have answered Vincey's question there. So are they calculating last 12 months pay or last 3 years? So it's the last 12 months, and then they look at the 12 months before that and the 12 months before that. So that actually they're looking at the last 3 years and they use whichever is the highest. All right, it's a common question, comes up a lot. Catherine, is that why on the annual statement you don't see a lump sum on the care section? Absolutely, because it's not a standard thing in the care scheme. You can still have one. When you get your retirement estimate, it will show you that, but it's just not going to show you that on the statement. More about that later. Michael, maybe worth mentioning not to leave accessing 95 till in 60 or you lose back. Well, shall we just wait for the rest of the session, Michael, and then we might see what we're talking about. Do you remember what we said at the beginning? Let's let the session flow, because that's where I'm going to give you the information in a buildable format to understand. Okay, super. Melanie, total service years, no, it's all right. Total service years I have on statement less than years in. Is this due to be part-time? Yes, because your statement is showing you the years that count towards your pension. So if you remember what we said here, the service is the time in the scheme pro rata for any part-time service. So if it's less, it's likely to be because you were part-time. Is it possible to show a couple of examples? Yes, going to do that in a bit, Irene, don't you worry. Is there a calculation to work out if your service is part-time? I'm 23 hours, so about 0.61. So for 1 year, in 95, if you were full-time, that would be 1 for 1 year. If you are 0.61, then it means you get 0.61 of a year for 1 year. So that would be, very quickly with the calculator, about 223 days. So it just literally, it's 365 days in a year times by your 0.61, and that tells you it's 223 days as opposed to 365. That's what it's doing. Claire, if we take 1995 earlier, are we losing out given that we're not putting into that scheme anymore? Nobody's losing out. Got nothing to do with putting in or not. What's happening is that if you want to take the pension, for example, at 55 instead of 60, it will be reduced because the scheme is paying it to you for 5 years longer, as opposed to it paying it to you from 60. There's no losing out here, okay? Not typically. In 2015 section, is it 1/54 of actual pensionable pay, no mention of service? Yes, okay, Tracy, so let's do it again. It's 1/54 of actual pay each year, and that's where we get the building blocks from. So in year 1, if my pay is 54,000, I divide that by 54, that gives me £1,000 of pension. In year 2, if my pay is the same, so it's still 54,000. I divide it by 54. That gives me another £1,000. I add that on to the £1,000 that I've already got, and now I've got £2,000 worth of pension. And the following year, we take the pay in that year, we divide it by 54, we add that on again. So you're adding it on as you go along. So that's why it's not bothered about service. It's actual pay, pensionable pay each year, and then it all adds together, so it builds like building blocks. Is the full time set by the employer, as I've heard some people having 35 and while others with 37.5? Yeah, it was 37.5 in England and Wales, definitely. I think in Scotland it might have been 36. And then some GP practices, for example, have different full-time hours. So yes, it's according to contracts of service. Okay. Right. Let's talk about retirement then. So as I've mentioned, you have some in 95, for example, and some in 2015, and they've got different pension ages. Okay. 1995 is payable unreduced from either 55 or 60, depending on if you have special class. I thought so, Sharon. So when you get to 60, you're not adding any more to 95. New pension is being built up in 2015 at the rate of 1/54. No more service is going on 95. Okay, it still keeps a link to your pay. So every time your pay goes up, your 95 pension will go up as well. So if you have a big promotion, for example, or you move up a point in your band, that's quite a big increase. That will jump the pension up, which is quite nice. Okay. However, once you get to your normal pension age, it doesn't really do anything else. It's not going to be reduced for taking it early, and it's still linked to pay. So if you're only expecting your pay to go up by standard pay awards, you are potentially missing out on pension money that you could be claiming. Okay, because when you're claiming it, not only are you receiving it, it then becomes linked to inflation. So we've seen lots and lots recently, we do loads of this on the Facebook group, about when you now reach your normal pension age for 1995, you need to really seriously consider putting it into payment. It does not get enhanced or uplifted if you take it late. It does not get backdated if you take it after 60. So you effectively have years of pension that you could have claimed, but you did not. Okay, now let's not dwell on that because somebody's just put, I think Kathleen's just put in the chat, she's 66 and she didn't take it at 60. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's not a disaster because what it does mean now is that actually you can have more pension in 2015. You can have 2015 pension from 2015, which is McCloud. And that, Kathleen, will actually, because of your age, give you a much higher pension. So all is not lost. You might hear people go, oh, you've lost 6 years. Well, first of all, no, you haven't, because it was building up in 95 until 2022. Partial retirement didn't really kick in properly until 2024, so it wasn't an option anyway. And actually, because you are at 66, 2015 is now likely to be higher for you anyway. So ignore everyone, do your thing. But for anybody who is now coming up to 60, you definitely need to have a serious look at that. It's really important. Why do I have 95 in 2015 and none in 2008? Because 2008 was only an option for those people who joined from the 1st of April 2008. It was for new joiners from that point. If you were already in 95, you stayed in 95. You weren't automatically moved across. You did have the option to switch into 2008, which was called a choice exercise. But assuming that you didn't do that, then you would have remained in 95. So you then will only have 95 and 2015. Hello, Catherine. I did 2 jobs part-time for 6 months with different NHS employers. Only one is showing on my electronic pay record. How do I correct this as it will be reducing my service? Right, well, you need to go to your employer and you need to speak to them to check they're sending the right information across the pensions. Then you need to look at your statement. We're coming to those in a moment to check, is your statement actually okay? Is it just that it's missing off a pay record rather than a pension record? Because a pension record is different to a pay record. Okay, let's talk about McCloud. Right, so who's heard of McCloud? That is quite reassuring considering why we're here. Does everybody know what it means? Oh, excellent. So I don't need to do this then, yeah, because we all know. No, okay, right. So let's talk about what it is. So the first thing to say about McCloud is it's not the pension scheme's fault. Okay, this was nothing to do with them. The McCloud ruling has come around across all of the public sector pension schemes. So in 2010-11, there was a review by central government of all of the public sector pension schemes. So NHS, teachers, police, fire, judges, civil service, and so on. Okay, so it was all of them. It was a collective review, and that review was done by Lord Hutton and is sometimes referred to as the Hutton Report. Okay, that's a good pub quiz question if that ever comes up. Now, that review recommended the introduction of the new schemes that we know as the 2015 schemes or the career average schemes. And the review was all about sustainability, fairness, longevity, and some other things. Okay. Now, what that review also said was, oh, and when you introduce the new schemes, please introduce them for everybody at the same time, or words to that effect. And then the unions got involved, and the unions went, no, don't do that, because it's not fair on the older people, allegedly. So they didn't. So what happened was, depending on how old you were at 2015, depended on whether you did, didn't, or when you moved into the new section. So some of you would have moved across as soon as it landed originally in 2015. It was a mandatory move. There was no choice about it. Some people moved but at a later date, any time between 2015 and 2022, and some people didn't move at all. And what determined which category you fell into was how close you were to retirement, which is also known as age discrimination. And we're not allowed to do that. So there was a few court cases that went on. Quite ironically, some of the unions then took it to court. You know, the unions who said don't introduce it for everyone at the same time, but anyway, there you go. But the first case that actually went through was Judge McCloud. Judge McCloud was a member of the Judicial Pension Scheme who did exactly the same thing. And so that's where we get the name the McCloud ruling or the McCloud remedy from, because it was the first kind of legal ruling. And in July 2019, the Court of Appeal said, yes, it's age discrimination. Over to you, central government, to fix it. So that's what we know as the McCloud ruling or the McCloud remedy. So it's gone on forever. It's taken a long, long time, because when they introduce pension scheme changes, even if it's because of something unlawful, they have to go through huge hoops and consultations and new statutes and various other things. So we didn't get the final regulations for this until October 2023. And since then, it's been some sort of mad world trying to get all of this stuff implemented, and it is taking time. So we just need to be patient with it. But essentially what the ruling is doing is something called rollback. So what rollback has done is put you back into your original section, whether that was 1995 or 08, up to the 31st of March 2022. Now, this is going to become more obvious when we look at the statements, so nobody panic at this stage. Just try and bank the information, because we're going to come back to it. Okay. So that's what you're going to see on your statement as your current benefits, because that is option A, and that is that you carried on in your original section until the 31st of March 22, and then 2015 started from the 1st of April 22. So everybody's, excuse me, sorry, live webinar. So that is everybody's new starting position, if you like. That is what you will now see. You also have a second option, which is quite often referred to as option B. On your statements, it's also referred to as the alternative option. And what option B is that you actually stayed in your original section until the 31st of March 15, and then your 2015 scheme starts from the 1st of April 15. Okay, so the idea is when you retire, you would get presented with both options for your circumstances, and you would choose whichever is the highest. Now, you don't make that decision until you retire. So although we're going to look at the statements and it is on the statements, you don't have to make a decision at the moment. It's all about retirement. Okay. So just the statement really is just for information. Now, if you've already retired, then what the scheme has to do is write out to everybody with, for example, hello Neil, you retired with option A, you actually now also have the choice of option B. What would you like to do? Now, they are not going out yet. They are hoping to go out this year. So for anybody who's already retired, they will start going out this year. Be aware, it's a long old process. Civil Service have started doing this. They're saying it's over 2 years it's going to take to write to all of the existing pensioners, and they're much smaller. NHS pensions have said it's going to go right past the end of 2026. So although it's starting, it's not going to go very fast. You know, it's going to take quite a long time. Now, the reason you get the two options, you might be asking why, is because for some people, option A is better, and for some people, option B is better. And it's all very much based on your individual circumstances. So the scheme can't make that decision for you. You have to make that decision yourself when you retire. Okay. Now, one of the things that came about in the ruling is that the scheme has to tell you all about the two options, and that is what you are now seeing on your new statements, which we're coming to in a second. So that is what the McCloud ruling is. Okay, so as we say, effectively, you're going to have two schemes. They can be taken independently, but you also have these A or B options here. Okay, does that make sense? Anyone got any questions on that so far? And we're going to get into the statement now. Okay. Perfect. Right. So very kindly, when I put the call to action out on the Facebook group, I asked for some of you to send me a copy of the statement so I could see it. So I'm using somebody's statement. It's anonymized, so nobody panic. But if you recognize the numbers, it might be yours, but it's all totally anonymous. It's just so I can use the example as a real life one. Okay. Now, the RSS stands for Remedial Service Statement. Okay, so as we said earlier, it is being emailed to active members. Now, a couple of things. It can only be emailed if they have your email address. So if the Scottish agency don't have your email address, they're not going to be emailing it to you. Don't panic. They will still send you a statement, but it's likely to follow later in the post. For those of you who have not had a statement yet, check your junk mail because sometimes it will go into there. So and it's usually the email address that you use to access the portal. So if you access the SPPA portal, whatever email address you use to access that will be the email address that they have to you. I don't know if that's your work one or your personal one, only you will know what you set up there, but that's the email address they should be using. Now, as I said, they're being rolled out gradually because there's a lot of them. They can't send them all out at once. So if you don't have one, don't panic just yet because they're still on the transition of sending them out. And I think the hope is that they'll have them all out in the summer, which is normally when you would get your 2025 statement. I'm aware of that. Okay. So there we go. Phase not all been issued yet. Nobody panic. Now, this statement is for the period ending the 31st of March 2024. So your 2025 statement is shortly going to follow as well, probably in the summer. Okay, now remember, your annual statements, I know a lot of you haven't had one since 2022, and the statements were stopped because of this ruling, because anything they sent to you at that point would just be wrong. So they just said, right, we're not going to do them. We're going to pause until we can get them right. Okay. So like your previous statements, they are just a snapshot. So they're going to show you your position up to the end of March 2024. Okay. And they're going to show you both the rollback, so option A and option B, which we know are your current position and your alternative position. What all of the annual statements show, and always have done, is the benefits that you've built up to the statement date. So if the statement date is the 31st of March 24, they're just showing you the benefits that you had built up to that time, but assuming that you take it at the normal pension age. So not that you're going to take it early, because they don't know that, but assuming that you take them at the normal pension age. And the normal pension age could either be 55 or 60 for 95, 65 for 2008, or state pension age for the career average scheme. Okay, so it depends on the scheme, but that's what it's doing. It's just benefits built up to that point, not projecting forwards, but assuming that you take them at the normal pension age. And that's what we need to remember all the way through this, okay? So this is like a normal annual statement. There is no decision to make. There is nothing for you to do unless something looks grossly incorrect, which we'll talk about. It is just a snapshot for information purposes. I'll be very clear on that. Excellent work, everyone. The other thing I'm going to say to you is read the statement. And I mean read the entire statement. Those of you who've got it, it's a fancy email. It's lovely, right? You need to read all of it, including the notes. It also gives you links. You'll see here, look, links. These are links, just in case you didn't know. Links, right? These links will take you to more information on the SPPA website to help you. So it's very nice that you've come tonight, and I think it's lovely, but use the other information that's available for you as well. Countless times you'll see me say, did you read the notes? And I know you haven't read the notes because of the question that you've asked. So use the stuff that's sent to you. So this is your ABS, your annual benefit statement for 2024. Okay, we've already established that, but just to be clear. It also says here, below is a link where you'll find a guidance video. Very helpful. So let's use that as well, because that will be super helpful. And it does say here, you need to review your statement, but there is no action to take because you make your choice at retirement. Okay, we got it? So read all of it, really important. Stop asking me about special class, guys. I'm coming to it, okay? So what you'll find at the top of the statement is general information about you. So your name, I presume you'll know if that's correct. What we call your superannuation number, which is your member number. So it's your unique identifier for the pension scheme, your date of birth. So you can obviously check that is correct. It's telling you about the benefits you've accumulated up to March 2024. It's also telling you you're eligible for remedy, and it's telling you how you should use the document. So again, do read everything. It's really important. They don't put stuff in the statement that is not important. They're not going to waste their time creating things that you don't need to know. So it's really important that you kind of look at that. All right. So March 24, remember. Now, what I've got here, your email has everything kind of stacked underneath each other. So you'll have in your email, you'll see current benefits, and then underneath it, you'll see alternative benefits. For ease, I have bung them on the same slide next to each other. Okay, so I know that yours are going to follow in a line. So what we've got are current benefits, which remember is the rollback. So the current benefits now is assuming that you remain in your original section to March 22. And 2015 is from April 22. And then the alternative is the other option, which is your original section to March 15, and then 2015 from the 1st of April 15. And you've got some different colours. So the darker teal box at the top is the career average scheme, or the 2015 scheme. And then the sort of grey boxes at the bottom are your final salary benefits, or you can see it says legacy benefits, okay? So career average at the top, legacy at the bottom. Now, in theory, your total is these two combined, but not quite. Okay, so we've got our career average. So we've got the accrual rate, which we now know is 1/54. We've got our pensionable pay. Now that is our pensionable pay to the 31st of March 2014, remember. So if you're looking at that going, I've had a pay rise since, we know, okay, this is to March 2024. And what it's going to do is say that because on this example, we joined the scheme on the 1st of April 22. So from the 1st of April 22 to the 31st of March 24. So for 2 years, we've built up just over £2,000 per annum of career average pension in this option. Okay, does that make sense? Yep, okay, perfect. Now I'm going to jump across to the other option a minute. So the other option then, again, it's still 1/54th. It still should be the same pay. If your pay is different across these, that's a problem. Okay, but you can see here that our care pension is much higher. It's nearly £8,000. And that's because, remember, this option is that we joined the care scheme on the 1st of April 15. Okay. So this is 1st of April 15, because this is your alternative. And if you read the notes, it will tell you that. Remember, we don't care about service for career average. We're just looking at pay history. And in the current, it's only 2 years. So in this one, we've got, how many have we got? From 2015 up to the end of 2024. So that coming up 9 years, we've got £8,000. But if we look at the first option, we've only got £2,000. So that's why you've got more in this option, because it's longer in that section. Okay. If we go to the bottom underneath where we've got legacy, so these are your final salary sections. So it says pensionable service. So the pensionable service is shown as like a big number, but it's split into years and days. So where this says 22,171, it's 22 years, 171 days. Okay, and that is your service. So remember, your service is your length of time in this section 4. So in this option here, it's in your service up to the 31st of March 2022, but pro rata for any part-time working. So if you don't think that's right, because you know what you've worked, then you need to go to SPPA and you need to ask them for a breakdown of your service. And the reason for that is you can check that nothing is missing. Okay, it gives you your pensionable pay. Now, again, this is pensionable pay to March 24th. You might have had a pay rise, we don't care. I'm going to come back to this in a minute because it's an issue. And it shows you your annual pension, so 12,947. And it also shows the lump sum. So if it's showing a lump sum, then this person is obviously in the 95 section, because remember, that's the one that has the automatic lump sum. Now, if we go across to the alternative, again, it's the same thing, but you can see our service is different. It's 15 years, 171 days this time. It's 7 years different, because this one assumes that we were only in our original section until March 15, so 7 years less. So again, what we can see is that the pension is less, and so is the lump sum, because we had less time at this point. But our career average is higher because we've got more time. So does that make sense? Are we all okay with that? Yeah, Nicola, yes, we are recording. It'll go on YouTube. Yeah. Any questions? Yep, so we've got it. So you've got A or B. Now, the kicker, not the kicker, but the thing that's difficult to get your head round is that the career average figures are at normal pension age for the career average scheme, which is state pension age. Your final salary figures are at the normal pension age for the final salary section. So if you're 95, these are the figures at 60, and this is at 67. These are the figures at 60, and this is at 67. So it's really hard to draw from the statement a direct comparison as to which is better, because you don't know, because you're not actually taking the benefits yet. And that's why we're not making the decision until we retire. Okay. So let's just look at this a bit more. I've broken it down for you. So I'm going to show you a comparison, just so that you can see what's happening. So you've got this little summary here. So it's showing current and it's showing care. So it shows under current career average is 2,000. The legacy pension is 13,000, and then we get 38,000 lump sum. But over here, it's showing care is nearly 8,000, legacy is nearly 9,000. And when you add those together, that's 17,000. So that's much higher than the pension over here. But this is assuming that this big bit here is taken at 67. And you might not want to do that. You might want to take it at 60. So they're not actually, to put them side by side comparison is not actually realistic, because it might not meet with what you want to do from a retirement point of view. So I've done a little comparison for you. Now, what I'm going to say here is this is one example for this particular person based on their circumstances now. Between now and when they retire, they might have 27 pay increases. They might have no pay increases. Inflation might be really high. They might be retiring, partially retiring, and want to fully retire at 62. You don't know which actually is going to give you the better outcome until you actually take the benefits. And that's why we make the decision at that time. So I'm going to show you an example, but I don't want you to run away with that and thinking that that's going to be the same for everyone, because it really isn't. Okay, and I need to make sure that you understand that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to assume that somebody's going at 60. So 1995 has a normal pension age of 60. So we know that's not going to be reduced. But 2015 is going to be reduced because we're paying it at 60 instead of 67 in this case. And the early retirement factor for taking it at 60 into 67 is 0.692. Okay. And I'm going to do both options. Don't forget, you're going to get these so you can look at these again on your own, and also you can watch this back. So the current benefits is this column here, the lighter column, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if I took all of my pension at 60, then we've got the 2,111 from care, and we times that by the early retirement factor, and that reduces it to £1,400.60. We don't reduce 95 because we're taking it at 60. So we add the two together, and that tells us that the total pension at 60 would be 14,400 and the lump sum of 38,000. If I do the same for option B to compare it, we take the 7,924 and times that by the early retirement factor, and then we add on the 1995, and that gives me 14,397. So you can see in this example, the pension amounts are almost the same. They are very, very similar. But what we do have is a lower lump sum. So all in all then, for this person, option A is probably better at this stage, but later on that might change. Now for somebody else, the opposite could be true, and actually option B could be better. So this is what I mean, is that you can't compare these exactly to each other, because it comes down to how and when you take the benefits. But just to give you an idea, that's what you're looking at. So remember, you're not restricted, and you can take the 2015 before your normal pension age, and you would then in theory be presented with these two options, and you would choose whichever is better for your circumstances. Other things to consider might be that you want to keep working until 65, but as we said, 1995 is best probably to be taken at 60. So you might want to take 95, the lower one, at 60, so you're not missing out on any of that, because your 2015 is going to be worth a lot more at 65. So these are the decisions that you're going to have to work through at the time that you retire, but we should not always assume that one is better than the other, and it always comes down to exactly what do you want to do. Okay, right, I'll go to questions before we do issues, and then we're almost finished, so thank you. I know we've run a bit, but we did start late, didn't we? I'll talk to you about special class in a second. Right, what happens if your previous employer no longer exists? GP practice dissolve. So if service is missing, so not there at all, what you can do is contact the HMRC and ask them for your contracting out history. And in there, if it shows that you were contracted out in the NHS pension scheme, you can provide that to the scheme and they will reinstate that service for you. Got a whole post on that on the Facebook group. Where does it show how long you've been in each scheme? So as we've said, current benefits from date of joining to the 31st of March 22, and you've got the service there in years and days, pro rata for any part-time working. So if you can't reconcile it back, you'll need to query that to get a breakdown. Option B is that you are in the final salary scheme until March 15, so that should be less, and again, you can reconcile it back. Okay. If I move between NHS England to NHS Scotland, would all the service show on the SPPA statement? No, Catherine. If you remember, one of the things I said right at the start is that they are separate. They're separate schemes. So your England one only moves if you transferred it. So if you transferred it, specifically, you have to make a request to do that, then it will show on the Scottish statement. But if you haven't transferred it, what that means is your 1992 to 2014 is in England, and from 2014 onwards, you're in Scotland, and they're not linked, and they're not linked to current pay because England stopped accruing in 2014. So it depends on if you transferred it or not as to whether it will show. Jill, so when you submit your retirement application, you will be given accurate options to make the choice. That is the plan. It's not happening at the moment. As I mentioned, McCloud is a huge piece of work. Lots of different bits of it are being rolled out at a time, but hopefully, yes, from later this year, when you come to take your pension benefits, they will give you both options and you can then make the choice. Now, what they'll do is if you say you're going at 60, is they'll give you the figures, two figures at 60, like I've done here. But what they won't be able to do is tell you, well, if you think, well, I'm going to carry on working, so actually, would I be better leaving the career average longer and having more in it? You'll have to work that out. And that's where you need to get independent help because it's really difficult to navigate. But you want to make sure you do that so you get the best possible outcome for you. Right, Catherine, I'm coming to pay. If you've applied to partially retire, do you get the option to take any now? If you apply to partially retire, you'll get paid this option. You'll get option A automatically now, and then option B will come to you later retrospectively. I'm showing protected status R with an NPA of 60. What does a protected status mean? I'm not sure, Gordon. I'm not sure, actually. I'd be interested to have a look at that, actually. Let's talk after the session, if that's all right. Maureen, I took partial retirement at the beginning of February and I've received my pension at the end of February and March. I've received 2 pensions every month, so I think I've received all my pension in the legacy scheme with McCloud. Now I received an RSS. So this is no longer appropriate for me as I only have care to take when I retire. So because you retired before March 24, because remember March 24 is the statement date, that's probably why you've got a statement. You do still have the options. They will still write to you and give you option. You've got option A at the moment, Maureen. They will write to you and say, Maureen, you've also got the choice of option B. Here are the figures. What do you want to do? And that will come to you later in case you want to change. Louise, I moved from England in 2005. Is it too late to transfer my pension in Scotland? In theory, yes. You're supposed to do it within the first 12 months, but nobody does because nobody knows they need to do it. So if you plead ignorance to NHS Scotland, they may allow you to do that. So it would be worth trying. Where can we find the early retirement factors? So if you Google, Eileen, NHS, SPPA, early retirement factors, they will magically appear in your Google search. Again, Angela, use the early retirement factors. And in 95, can you adjust the lump sum and reduce monthly pension payments? Yes. So in all of the sections, I think I mentioned this before, you can do something called commutation, and that is where you can swap pension for lump sum. When you do your retirement forms for SPPA, there is a question in there that says, would you like some information about this? You tick that and they will send you some figures. So the lump sum goes up, the pension comes down, and you can get that in a retirement estimate or when you start your retirement process. My legacy is taking my pay with on the higher pay full time and I'm now part time. How would I work this out? I'm not sure what you mean, Louise. So legacy does use full time pay, but 2015 will use actual. So I'm not sure what you're asking, if I'm honest. while you're thinking about that, let's talk about issues. So these issues, do you remember what I said at the start? Don't ask me anything that I haven't covered yet, because I'm coming to it. So what you all did was ignore everything I said, and we're jumping in about stuff that I'm now going to talk to you about. Okay, so issues that we know of on these statements. Somebody picked up on it. So the first thing is the final salary earnings. If you look at this example, are 46,100, and the career average earnings are 58,000. It is impossible for the final salary pay to be lower than the career average pay. It's possible for it to be higher, because remember, this is actual, whereas this is full-time equivalent. So for a part-timer, I would expect it to be higher. It is impossible for it to be lower. And yet here it is, lower. So what we know has happened is that where you are somebody who has basic pay plus other things, and when I say other things such as unsocial hours payments and things like that, it has been inadvertently omitted from the pay in the final salary section. I don't know why, because it managed to include it up here. So it is wrong, and therefore it means the pension has been calculated on this statement on a pay that is too low. It is not an ongoing issue for pensions in payment. It is an error on these statements. So if your final salary pay is lower than your career average, it's probably because you've got some extra elements to your pay that for this statement, for reasons nobody really understands, they've omitted to include it. Okay. The other thing that is not showing is special class status. So you can see here it says your legacy benefits are payable from 60 for 95 and 65 for 2008. It doesn't tell you which section you're in. You have to work that out yourself. And it also doesn't tell you if you have special class status. It doesn't actually even really refer to it until you get to the notes. So that is also quite annoying, because we've had some people question it because they've got special class, but the statement implies that they haven't. If you think you've got special class but you're not sure, go back and ask. So you can ask your employer, because your employer's got access to your pension record, and they'll be able to tell you if it's on there. Special class is for anybody who joined the scheme before the 6th of March 1995 in a qualified nursing role, physio, midwives, and special mental health workers. Okay, if you fall into that category and you have not had a break of service in more than 5 years, then you should have special class status. Okay, anybody else, it doesn't apply to. It's a special status that only applied to a certain group of people up to March 95. Okay. Will service include MHO years? It should do, Katie, but check, because obviously we are aware that, as I say, there are a couple of issues. Retiring on my 66th birthday after 21 years, I take it I will get 95 in 2015. Yes, if that's what you choose, because remember, you make independent choices about your pension. You tick on the form which bits you want. Do you want 95? Do you want 2015? Do you want both? So you decide. Yes. Hello, Steve. If it's good to take 95 at 60, but you have to take partial retirement to put the one scheme into payment, what happens if your employer won't let you? Okay, so your employer can put a kibosh on partial retirement. If you want to reduce your hours, particularly because you have every right to request flexible working, but of course they have every right to refuse it. So it might mean that partial retirement cannot be an option. You can look at whether there's other things you can do, have unpaid leave, go on to a lower banded role, is retire and return an option. But ultimately, the employer is not stopping you from taking the pension. They are stopping you from changing your working pattern. So if it becomes a real problem, what some people do is just leave, take the pension and then go and work somewhere else. I'm not saying do that necessarily, but yeah, you're going to have to make it work with the employer. So whilst everybody's saying take the pension at 60, because you should, it's not always possible. And then you've got to kind of assess the bigger picture to see what's actually going to work better for you in the long run. Okay, so actions. First of all, save your statement. It's been emailed to you. It might come to you in the post. Save it somewhere. Make sure you've got it. Check your pay and your service. As we've said, we know there are problems with the pay on the final salary statement. We don't know why, but we do know what it is. Check your service looks right and reasonable. If you can't reconcile it, get that sorted as soon as possible, because it means your pension will be wrong and there is no point in waiting until you retire, because that's just awful. Remember, you don't need to do anything until you retire. This is information only, and it's just high-level snapshot stuff. When you get to the point where you want to retire, then you can use the online calculators. There is an online remedy calculator. Again, Google SPPA NHS partial retirement or McCloud Remedy calculator, and there is an online calculator you can use. You will also get figures from the scheme at the time that you retire, and you can choose whichever is the best option. Pension figures, as you've seen, are quite close. But lump sum, it can work either way, and it also depends on the age that you are. The more past 60 you get, then typically you would expect longer in 2015 to be higher, but not always, and so you need to look at all your options. You need to also weigh up the options if you're continuing to work and so on. Remember, everybody will be different, and go, go, go. So read all your notes. Take your time. There's no rush. If you read it and you don't understand it, that's fine. Go back and do it again. Put your statement next to the supporting notes so you can see what the notes are telling you. The SPPA website, this is a screenshot of it here, has loads of information on it, all those little videos and things I talked about earlier, so use that as well. This is not something to be rushed, but it is something that you need to take your time on to understand. Okay. We also have something called Member Zone. Member Zone is our subscription service. Now, it does have a little warning. It's not always suitable for Scottish people. Why am I telling you about it? Well, because the bits that are not suitable for Scottish people are forms. At the moment, the forms that it references are the England and Wales forms only. So the forms are a bit different, but how the scheme works, how benefits build up, what your options are, how to interpret things are the same for everyone. We have access to special webinars, we have access to videos. There are now calculators on there for things like pension input amount, and there are some more calculators coming very soon. So it might be something that if you're really struggling and you can't navigate around the SPPA website because it's a bit weird, then it's in an easy place for you to have a look at. So there are things there. There's a link to where it is on our website, and you can also watch me do a video demonstrating it. We do also provide tailored support. You can find information about that on our website. So that ranges from a discussion where we'll help you to understand things on a personal level to doing modelling and things like that. I would always say there's loads of free stuff. Use the free stuff first. That's what it's for. But this isn't always in everybody's wheelhouse. Remember, it's a massive investment. It's a significant amount of money. We need to make sure we understand it properly to make really good financial decisions. We've got links to things at the back, including the NHS SPPA website, so you can go and use that as well. And then you're also going to have my contact details in case you need to get in touch. And now I'm going to come to questions. Before I do the last lot of questions, I'm going to turn off the recording now. So if anybody does want to verbally ask a question and not be on the recording, you can do so. Okay, but thank you very much, everyone. I know we've overrun a bit, sorry.